You've got astrology questions, and I have some astrology answers. That's right, it's a question and answer session all about astrology and how I practice astrology as a professional astrologer. So, yeah, let's get into it. Hey, Cosmic Cuties, it is your friendo, the Lady Ms. Vagina Jenkins, and yeah, this is going to be one of those question and answer kinds of videos. This is also going to be a video of celebration and gratitude. I don't know if y'all saw, but I just hit the 1,000 subscriber monetization mark here on YouTube, which is a goal that I've been pushing for the last 18 months. So I'm so grateful to be at this point, and I'm so grateful to you for getting me to this particular milestone. Thank you so much to everyone who has subscribed to my channel. Thank you to everyone who comments on my videos, likes my videos, shares them to your networks. All of those things are what helped me get to this point. Also, by the way, in terms of a celebration, I'll be going live on Friday, December 27th at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. That's 3:30 Eastern. We'll talk about how I got to this milestone. We'll talk about my plans for 2025, and we'll do a couple of pay what you can astro readings and answer your personal astrology questions about your chart. So definitely come through. I would love to see you there, and I would love to appreciate you and show my gratitude by sharing wisdom with you. Speaking of shared wisdom, let's get into the questions. So I put out questions on all my social media platforms, on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, and of course on YouTube. So this is a combination of all of those questions. First question comes to us from YouTube at Wolfsbane Witch. They ask, is there a specific type or types of astrology, evolutionary astrology, Vedic astrology, Western, etc., that you prefer? And if so, why? Also, do you believe astrology is predictive? Ooh, that is a really good question. So, I consider myself a hoodoo-centered modern astrologer. And by that, I mean there are ways in which my particular ancestors looked at the sky, noticed the patterns therein, and applied them to their lived experience. And I hope that my work is a continuation of that legacy. So that's the hoodoo part. The modern part, modern astrology, for better or worse, does tend to pick from the history of astrological traditions to make a sort of modern take on astrology. And I feel like I do the same. Less in the way of the way capitalism picks and chooses what it finds valuable, but more in the way of me as a mutable sign dominant person, picking and choosing the things that I put into my knapsack, what serves me, what doesn't, what I take with me, what I leave behind. So as a modern astrologer, I combine some traditional elements like using the whole sign house system, like understanding the planets through the system of essential dignity and planetary joy. I tend to add in some sidereal elements in that I will look at a chart through both the tropical and the sidereal lens to understand the nuance of the chart. I love the idea of applying evolutionary astrology to a chart in that we are constantly experiencing these cycles of the planets in our lives and beyond our lives, and the way that those cycles help us level up each cycle. So that feels like part of incorporating the evolutionary astrology part of the thing. And I have a great deal of respect for the way that Vedic astrology is practiced, though I don't actually incorporate it in my particular astrology practice. But I love the way that it talks very frankly and plainly about the ways that planetary energy manifests. Do I believe that astrology is predictive? I'm going to say yes and no, but mostly no. When I think about any particular planet or sign, I think a lot about the spectrum of ways that that energy can manifest. I also think about fate and free will. So when I'm thinking about, transit astrology or some sort of predictive form of astrology, I'm always thinking about, okay, it could manifest in all of these ways. Throughout history, we have collected data about a number of ways that this energy manifests, and each individual human has their own free will. So yeah, no, I don't think that you can predict anything 100% on the nose because of those factors. For example, we saw a lot of astrologers make an ASS out of you and me during the presidential election, saying that Trump would never be president. I mean, of course, January 20th has not arrived yet, but I don't know. So yeah, I don't necessarily think of astrology as a predictive tool because of those factors. But I also still love transit astrology as a tool in my arsenal to understand how things could potentially play out and how and what to be aware of. Thank you, Wolfsbane Witch, for those questions. Very good way to start out the session. Our next question comes to us also from YouTube, from Dottie the Psychic. So wait, before I get to the question, I don't know if y'all know this, but I help run a Discord server called Cultivate Community. It is made up of a group of YouTube creators that are looking to build their YouTube channels for different reasons, and are looking to do that not in isolation, but rather in community. I say that because Dottie the Psychic is one of the members of the Discord server who is particularly active and very insightful, and I always appreciate their insight and feedback as I share my process. And so, yeah, if you are such a creator, or if you're trying to become a YouTube creator in 2025, please reach out. I would love to add you to the server and be in community with you as you build your own channel. All right, so that's all about that channel. Now, back to the questions. Dottie the Psychic asks, what is the most effective use of astrology? Would an establishment be able to use a chart the same way an individual would? Yes, they would, Dottie. Yes, they would. Now, to your first question, what's the most effective use of astrology? I don't know, most effective. There just are so many ways to use and apply astrology. We all know about natal chart astrology to understand our own personal energy, but there's also transit astrology. What are the planets in the sky doing right now since you were born, and how does that affect you based on your particular natal chart? What's the intersection? There's also medical astrology. There's also electional astrology. What's the best time to approach any given endeavor? That's one of my favorite ways to use astrology. That's how I determined when to start my channel, and how I determined so many factors of my channel. There's so many ways to engage with astrology. So I don't know necessarily what the most effective way, but there are many ways. Your second question, though, yes, an establishment, a country, a governmental body, a media project or a creative project. There are so many entities that have their own charts besides our individual natal charts. In astrology, you can run a chart for anything that has a time, a date, and a place in which it happened. So, for example, I did a chart interpretation of the U.S. based on July 4th, 1776, and the signing of the Declaration of Independence. My astrology channel has its own particular chart based on starting in June 1st of 2023, making this astrology content. I'll bet we could also look up the chart for businesses like Starbucks to understand why they feel the need to invest in Zionist genocidal regimes. We could look at the astrology chart of our favorite television show or movie, depending on when it actually went into production. So yeah, you could run a chart for anything that has a time, a place, and a date in which it happened. And then you could compare yourself to that given chart to understand where the resonance and the alignment is. So yeah, lots of ways to use astrology, and that is a particular favorite of mine. The lighting conditions are really changing rapidly. I don't know where to put my body to avoid these intense shadows. Let's put my body here. Sure, why not? Scooting the mic over very slowly. All right. So our next question comes from TikTok at Nebhet. Nebhet asks, what is your favorite house to examine for clients? Well, I'm going to name two because I think every astrologer would tell you that the first house is just crucial to the endeavor. It lays out the following 12 houses. The first house talks about you, yourself, your presentation in the world, and it also contains the ascendant. So yeah, the first house is probably agreed upon the most important house. But the other house that I personally like to look at when I'm doing my natal chart readings for clients is the 6th house. Because to me, and, comment below if you find, a different signification or an additional signification for the 6th house. I think that it can talk about so many things. I love the 6th house for the way that it talks about the little mundane building blocks that constitute a full life. It's all of these little threads. What time you wake up in the morning, what you eat, how you eat, when you eat, what your daily routine looks like, what your work life looks like. It's all of these little mundane things that people take for granted that ends up creating, the quality of your life, your health, your relationship with your body. Those kinds of things can be found in the 6th house. And so for me, I love to look at the 6th house for my clients. Now, maybe I'm biased because my particular chart ruler is in the 6th house. So maybe that's why I find it particularly intriguing. But yeah, examining and understanding my own 6th house has been so helpful to me that I often want to offer that same check-in to my clients. So yeah, Nebhet, thank you for your question. Short answer, 1st house, 6th house. Our next question comes from YouTube, and it is from at Unique Hardy 5526. And they ask, what are some ways that astrology and food intersect? Is there a way to use astrology to interpret dishes and how ingredients in a dish interact with each other like the planets do? Yes, there is. The same way that we can create a chart based on a particular event, you could create a chart based on a particular dish and when it was invented. And the example that comes to mind is the Caesar salad. Let me look up the information. Hold on. All right. So the Caesar salad was invented on July 4th, 1924 in Tijuana, Mexico by Italian immigrant Cesar Cardini. That's one way that we could understand the energy of this particular dish is by looking at its own birth or natal chart. I will also say that just like the planets are associated with particular energies in our natal charts, they're also correspondences to the natural world. So, for example, herbs and spices can be associated with a particular planet. One that comes to mind is chamomile being associated with the sun and thus being associated with Leo because Leo is ruled by the sun. I also remember that different salts are associated with different signs. Also, ways of cooking, is a fire sign way of cooking, doing barbecues or brasseries, is an air sign way of cooking, doing experimental food, or maybe it's about smoking meats and things like that. Are earth signs more associated with perhaps cattle, bison, those kinds of meats, and are water signs more associated with seafood or river and ocean, foods? Crossing fingers that seaweed is associated with Pisces because I love me some dang seaweed. So yes, to answer your question, Unique Hardy 5526, yes, you can use astrology to understand food, both the dishes and the ingredients that comprise those dishes. What a Taurus-ass question to ask, by the way. Are you Taurus rising, Taurus sun, moon, stellium? Tell me about it in the comments. Our next question comes from YouTube account at Woodland Thing. And they ask a more complicated question about house systems. They say, I'd like to know what you think about house systems. In their chart, it sounds like they have maybe some planets right before their rising sign, and depending on what house system, Placidus, whole sign, I think they said equal houses. Yeah, they use equal houses. I use whole sign, so I'm going to answer from that perspective, by the way. But yeah, depending on what house system they look at, these planetary placements show up in the 12th house or the first house. And they're wondering which house system to choose. Now, I will say that I do have a video about this, which I'll link up here somewhere. Choosing between Placidus and whole sign house systems. But yes, checking out that video. But mostly what I want to say to you is that I think that this is part of your astrology journey. Because I think there was definitely a time in my astrology journey where I was like, okay, I have to figure out what house system I use and what school of astrology I fall into, and make an absolute decision right now. And I would say, what if you allow your astrology journey to unfold over time? And what if you allow your astrology journey to be based on the wholeness and the holistic nature of your chart rather than just these 12th first house placements? And the reason why I say that is because, yes, those placements can go from 12th to first house depending, and I'm sure there are other places in your chart that also change houses depending on what house system you use. But no matter what, these planets are having a relationship to each other that does not change based on the house system. An opposition between two planets is an opposition no matter where you find it. A square between two planets or a trine between three planets, a grand trine, is the same no matter what house system you use. And so, yeah, what if you were able to look at your chart more holistically, more relationally, instead of just this emphasis on this particular house and having to figure out the house systems right now? Also, what if you looked at your chart through a number of different house systems? I have one client where they have a similar chart. They have, in whole sign house system, their first house has a 5-degree Mercury and a 29-degree rising sign. So when I take that same chart to Placidus, it becomes a Mercury that sits in the 12th house, and then their first house starts at 29 degrees. And so I look at both. I look at Placidus for the nuance of things. Okay, we're looking at the second house and how they earn their money. Oh, part of how they earn their money is in a Virgo way, and the other part of how they earn their money is in a Libra way. So what can we understand about the intersection of these energies versus looking at it whole sign for the transits of things. Mercury in the sky is sitting in the middle of their second house. And so right now, during this time, what can they speak on? What ideas can they explore to expand their pocketbook? So yeah, to reiterate, holistic nature of the chart, using on multiple different house systems and understanding you don't have to have it figured out all right now. Man, these shadows. I might pause for a second and see if I can figure out something with this window. Give me a second. Be right back. All right, let's give that a try. Our next question comes from Instagram, from the homie, Reina de Aslan. So Reina is a twin, and I reached out to them a couple of years ago because I wanted to see them and their twins' chart to understand the subtle differences between twins' charts, which, by the way, twins, one is born a little bit after the other, so there are subtle differences in the chart. And I'm developing a theory. So they ask, I always think about my brother and I. He is the metal bender. Is there anything in astrology? Is there anything on astrology and like alchemy? Yes, there is. So back in the day, and by back in the day, I mean specifically medieval Europe, alchemy and astrology were very much tied to each other. I think in modern days, we think about alchemy as, oh, those were those wacky people that were trying to turn metals into gold. And sure, that was, I'm sure, part of it. But a large part of alchemy was understanding the astrological associations of different metals and applying them to the daily use for particular people with their particular astrological charts and astrological needs. So, for example, metal silver is associated with the moon and thus Cancer. Iron is associated with Mars and thus Aries. So what if you had a night that had a lot of Cancer placements and a lot of Aries placements, and you could melt down metals, combine them to make an alloy to create a sword for this night that combined somehow silver and iron and whatever was needed, and tailor it particularly for this particular night. Yeah, a lot of the metals had astrological associations, and so they were using the combination of astrology and alchemy to create metallic alloys that were useful for particular astrological needs. I also think it's interesting that in the modern day, we have debunked astrology as a fake or pseudoscience, debunked alchemy as a fake or pseudoscience, but astrology is the basis for the modern official science of astronomy, and alchemy is the basis for the modern science of chemistry. So I find it interesting because, again, it's nuance, it's spectrum, it's not things in black and white. So yes, I don't know of any particular resources that talk about this practice of the combination of alchemy and astrology. I'm sure that there are some out there, but yeah, back in the day, astrology, alchemy, besties. Thank you, Reina, for your question, and also, I love you. Our next question comes from YouTube, from the Wolfsbane Witch again, at Wolfsbane Witch. They ask, what are your thoughts on pop astrology as it's shown in pop culture? Yeah, I hate the way that astrology is talked about in pop culture. Sometimes when I'm feeling more expansive, I think, well, this is a very simplified version. Maybe this is providing a gateway for folks to really get into the study of astrology. But for the most part, I think, gosh, this is doing a disservice for this tool of data collection that so many cultures over so many centuries have created, Example, I think we all know about horoscope columns and how they're so often written from the lens of sun sign astrology. But one's sun could happen in any house of your chart. So to be able to say, hey, Pisces, you're going to have a hard week at work. What is that based on? Do you know what house my sun is in? And do you know what my 10th house of work is like and what particular sign rules that house? How is this going to be accurate for a Pisces with a 12th house sun, or a Pisces with a 4th house sun, or a Pisces with an 8th house sun? Like, how can these be the same horoscopes for each of those people? Which, by the way, that reminds me of the thing that I'm always saying, which is to read your horoscope for your rising sign and not your sun sign. Most actual professional astrologers are writing those columns for your rising sign. It's just that back in the day, people didn't know what time they were born, so they didn't know their rising sign. And so we got used to reading for sun signs and sun sign astrology, and it's just this much of a picture of astrology that is like this big, I also hate that because of sun sign astrology or pop culture astrology, people will debunk astrology without understanding what the full system of it is. Like, how can you offer an educated opinion on astrology when you don't entirely understand the multiple systems at play? So yeah, that is my opinion on the way that astrology shows up in pop culture or pop culture astrology. I find it challenging, but I cross my fingers and hope that it is a gateway to a broader curiosity. So yeah, thank you, Wolfsbane Witch, for your questions. Really good questions, by the way. Another question comes to us from YouTube from the homies Squid Iki. I haven't seen you making content on YouTube, but I've been thinking about you, and I've been thinking, if you're not making content on YouTube, I hope that you're making some really dope art out there in the world. So yeah. Thanks for commenting, and thanks for having my back, and let me know about the ways that I can also support you in your creative endeavors. But yeah, Squidiki asks, I'd love to hear your thoughts on astrology and creativity. In particular, they say, I hear that Leos are very self-expressive, but I'm curious to see how other folks express themselves creatively based on how their placements work. Yes. So this is a really good follow-up to the question about pop culture astrology. One way that pop culture astrology works is that it associates particular signs with particular houses in a one-to-one correspondence. Oh, Aries is the same as the first house, and Taurus is the same as the second house. And while there is a bit of crossover, that's not exactly the case. And so that's where you end up with things like, oh, Leos are the creative sign, because Leos are associated with the 5th house of creative self-expression and hobbies and children, dating, things like that. And so I think it does a disservice to us all to make that one-on-one or one-to-one comparison, because then you end up with these like sort of stereotypes about Leo being the creative sign. And while I do think of Leos as very performative and able to shine in the spotlight, I think that everybody has a different sort of creativity. For example, when I think about fire sign creativity, of which Leo is one, I very much think about creativity that is brought about by a spark. It's this passion of an idea. It's this passion of an idea. It's following this spark in this kind of excited, passionate manner. completing a project fervently and maybe even a little impulsively. Like that's the kind of fire sign energy that I think about when I think about creativity. When I think about water sign creativity, I think about the idea of ideas that come to us in dreams, ideas that come to us sparked by spirit or maybe even ancestral connection, and work processes or work plans that kind of have an ebb and flow to them like the tides. I think about also the connection between emotions and feeling and creativity. So yeah, those are some water sign creativity sorts of things that come to mind. When I think about earth sign creativity, I think about work plans and organizational strategies that allow you to complete projects. About practical forms of creativity. An example that comes to mind is patching clothes. Like there's a really boring, plain way to patch clothes, and then there are beautiful ways to patch clothes, like using custom embroidery stitches and using colorful pieces of fabric, that kind of thing. And then when I think about air sign forms of creativity, I think about connecting with others via these creative ideas, working together in collaboration and in community, and yeah, connecting to other people via the lens of creativity. So yeah, I say all that to say, I think that every sign has its own specific type of creativity, and every planet has its own specific type of creativity. You know, they say that Leos are the creative one, but also what about Neptunians and the ways that they're able to act and perform on stage and in front of the camera? He said in Neptune first house. So yeah, every sign can be creative in their own unique and special way. Thank you, Squidiki, for such a exciting question. It really makes me think about my own particular creative practice as a person who is an artist and an astrologer. So yes to that. Thank you. And then our final question comes from, again, Dottie the Psychic here on YouTube. They ask, how can we use astrology to predict greater societal trends? So reminder, the caveat that I don't necessarily think that astrology is 100% predictive, because we have free will and the ways that planetary energies are on a spectrum in their manifestation. But astrologers do think about generational and societal patterns and a lot by looking at the outer planets, Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus primarily. Because they have such slow transit signs, sitting in a particular sign for anywhere from like 10 to 30 years, depending on which planet and which sign. Because of those slow transit times, they can be an indicator of a particular generation or cohort in society. I did a video about this, and I'll link it up here as well, about the Pluto generations. So, for example, Gen X, Pluto in Libra, that's my generation. A lot about personal power and how we relate to other folks and how we feel traumatized in our relating to other folks because of those power dynamics, and what it means to continue to invest in community versus pulling away from community. That's one way that Pluto and Libra can manifest. Versus the boomers, Pluto in Leo generation, and how Leo is so much rooted in being a king or monarch, or being respected as a monarch in some kind of way. And so you will hear boomers over and over, I hear them use words like, you know, why doesn't anybody show any respect anymore? Respect is really, really big. And what they mean by their definition of respect as being lifted up as some sort of monarch authority type figure, and looking down on others, you know, that respect is to pedestal them over everything. And this is a spectrum of energies. I'm talking about the worst case scenarios in these particular Pluto generations. It's also interesting to think about in terms of outer planets. We right now are in the midst of great shifts. So I know that we all feel it, like on the interpersonal, societal level, but it's also happening in the sky. So a couple of weeks ago, we had Pluto's final ingress into Aquarius. Whenever I think about Pluto, I think about power dynamics. Whenever I think about Aquarius, I think about existing structures, rebelling against them to make something that is better for the people. So it's real power to the people kind of energy. And then in March of 2025, we will have Neptune in Aries. Neptune talks about the ways and the things that we dream of, but also the ways in which we have had the wool pulled over our eyes, been, you know, a victim of illusion, that kind of thing. And then Aries is so much about, and then Aries, one of the ways that it can manifest is also via like fighting, rebellion, putting oneself first. And so the energy of Neptune and Aries that I am hoping for is the kind of energy of dreaming of a better world and fighting for it. That combined with the Pluto power to the people type energy has me hype. Now, I will tell you that's just my interpretation. A lot of astrologers are talking about how this is the beginning of the end. And yeah, I think that it is in a particular way, but I feel hopeful about the beginning of the end because I am ready for something new, something that serves us all instead of just our corporate or overlords and the 1%. Yeah. Greater societal trends, one way that astrologers can look at them is through what is happening with those outer planets that move really, really slowly, but have generational impact. I think that was our last question. I've really enjoyed answering these questions. If you have any other ones, please put them in the comments below because I love engaging with y'all in this way, hearing what you think about things and sharing my opinions about things. What you think about things and sharing my wisdom about things. It feels like an exchange of wisdom. Speaking of the exchange of wisdom, if you would like to support me in sharing my wisdom, in doing this work here on YouTube, please consider becoming a member of this channel. Membership in this channel starts at $3.99 a month, and you get really cool perks like custom emojis, loyalty badges. You get to see content before it's released to the general public. And it's an amazing way to support your favorite Black queer autistic astrologer. If you don't have capacity for that monthly commitment, I absolutely understand and would instead encourage you to consider the tip option via the thanks button below. If neither of those financial options feel doable, feel free to support by leaving a comment, by liking, by sharing my content with your networks, because those are really good ways and important ways to engage with and support my work here on YouTube as well. Yes. So yeah, that is it. That is the video. Thank you so much for everybody that asked a question. If I missed your question, please let me know so that I can cover it next time. I hope to see you on Friday for the live stream. And I think that's everything. Yes. Thank you for watching this video to the end, and thank you so much for making time for queer astrology. Bye.